A man fought Keir Starmer's police state and won. There are people in prison for social media posts after the Southport attack who should not be there, in my view. I think that they were scared into pleading guilty. Yet they still received years behind bars, and one man, Peter Lynch, sadly took his own life. But Jamie Michael, a former Royal Marine, decided to plead not guilty, and it took a jury just 17 minutes to acquit him. He posted a video on Facebook in which he said things like this.
Little one's been lost and 5 still critical. Okay. And that's the main reason really why I'm making this video. We couldn't make a video about 3 months ago, and I warned that this type of thing was going to start happening. We, as a community, should not let any of these type people into our valley, okay? We shouldn't let any of these migrants who've just come into the country, okay, settle here in the valleys. We need to be onto the councillors. We need to be onto the politicians to make sure this doesn't happen.
Now, he may have said some things in what was about a 13-minute video that were a bit clumsy. But in the wake of the Southport massacre and the Hare Hills riots, which, by the way, saw scenes like this... and the reaction to the alleged Manchester Airport incident.
We saw you. We know you're in there. Come out. Explain yourself. Why has only one officer been suspended? What about the rest of them?
As well as the recent crime league table, which found that foreign nationals are more likely than 3 times, by the way, 3 times more likely, to be arrested for sexual offences as British citizens. I contest that Jamie Michael was saying things that millions of other people say every single day. He was charged with stirring up racial hatred, using a recording under Section 2(1) of the Public Order Act 1986. That is despite him also saying in that video things like this.
Getting bats and knives and stuff and doing what they're doing, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about doing things the right way.
So he was originally jailed for 17 days before being granted bail. Now, under that kind of pressure, most people would have pleaded guilty to try and lesser their sentence. The government was putting out tweets like this one on social media, weren't they? Think before you post. Terrifying people. That seems to be saying if you post something we don't like, you'll be locked up. Prime Minister Keir Starmer came out and seemed to tell judges exactly what he wanted them to do.
And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week. That should send a very powerful message.
The Home Office put out a post that seemed to already find people guilty, actually. But Jamie stuck to his guns, didn't he? And a jury of his peers found him not guilty after just 17 minutes. That is because it's a jury of normal people, not a jury of Keir Starmers. Do you know who reported Jamie to the police? Someone who worked for the Welsh Labour Party in their communications team, apparently. So, apparently, of the 6 people who decided to plead not guilty for a variety of offences in the wake of the Southport massacre, only 1 was convicted. Now, doesn't that tell you that if more had pleaded not guilty, then more would probably be free today? But they were under pressure, and that pressure came right from the very top. We should have an urgent review of every single speech-related offence in the wake of Southport, and there should be an inquiry into the role that Keir Starmer may have played in influencing the justice system. Keir Starmer talks about service. I'm not really sure he knows a thing about it. Certainly not compared to a Royal Marine, who was, and still is, willing to die for his country. And to think, he was nearly locked up for just speaking his mind against the kind of mass immigration policies that our Prime Minister has been in favour of for decades. I'm joined now, very gratefully so, by Jamie's barrister, Adam King. Adam, thank you very much for joining us tonight. This is an absolutely astonishing case. Can you believe that it ever actually even went to court?
Well, I can believe it. I've just done the trial, but I'm surprised that they decided to charge it. We asked them to drop it. They didn't. I think ultimately that was a mistake.
And he was actually potentially facing a bit of time in prison, wasn't he? Do you think this was just an egregious kind of trampling on someone's right to freedom of speech?
Yes, I do. I think it was an egregious trampling on his rights to free speech. I should say we got, not lucky, but we were fortunate in that we had a fair judge, a very fair judge, and a fair prosecutor, and obviously a fair jury. That doesn't always happen, right? And I think the trouble with charging someone like Jamie Michael for saying the things that he said is that it could go horribly wrong.
Do you think that there are people in prison now for certainly speech-related offences after the Southport massacre who, had they pleaded not guilty, could well have avoided prison?
Undoubtedly, yes.
Do you think they were pressurised into pleading guilty in some senses?
I know of one or two, at least, decisions to remand a defendant in custody which would not have been taken. That is to say, they would not have been remanded in custody in normal circumstances. And I think that is likely to have weighed very heavily on those defendants when it came to deciding whether or not to plead guilty. Because when you've been taken from your sofa to a police cell, to a court cell, to a prison cell, all in the space of 48 hours for something that you wouldn't have thought was an offence, the feeling that the system is against you and you're not going to win no matter what is likely to be overwhelming. And so you're more likely to take the discount for pleading guilty and take it on the chin rather than try and fight it.
Do you think that Keir Starmer has some responsibility for that and some of the rhetoric that he was putting out there, coupled with maybe some of the tweets that I showed earlier from the Home Office? Do you think that he maybe set the tone there for that?
I think he probably had a role in setting the tone, yeah. I mean, to be fair to him, as Prime Minister, he's going to have to take a pretty hard line when there's actual rioting taking place. But there are many others involved in the system beneath him who perhaps could have done more to maintain a level of proportionality.
Look, I should really finish by asking how Jamie is, really. I mean, he's been through the ringer, to say the least, got the result he was after, but clearly it must have had a massive impact on his life. How is it?
He seemed fine to me. He seemed very well. He's a very nice and peaceful man. He was peaceful before, during and after the trial. And I expect he's just looking forward to getting on with his life in the normal way at this point.
All right, well, Anna, can I just say a massive thank you for coming into the studio this evening and for talking us through it, giving us your kind of insight, really, into all of it. That is Adam King there, who's Jamie's barrister. I'm going to whiz myself over to my panel now. So we are joined, of course, by former Tory MP Anna Firth. We've also got Lord Bailey and ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Lars. Well, look, there's a lot to take in there, isn't there? Anna, do you think there should be some kind of review here? I mean, a jury, the standout line for me, though, is that it took a jury of his peers 17 minutes, right? Because that is essentially a jury of really normal people. Yep. And I don't think, based on anything he said, that most people would think that he could be staring down the barrel of years in prison. You know, do you think we need to kind of review into the sentences of some of these people? I
think we probably do. I think this was a particularly stark case, and I'm amazed that he was charged with, with an offence that carries a 7-year prison sentence, potentially. Obviously, it's unlikely anyone would get that much, but that shows the severity of the charge he was facing. I listened to the whole of that 13 minutes this afternoon. You showed us a few clips. It's absolutely clear that he is very affected by what had gone on, and he's saying that we have got to get together as a community in the right way. We've got to engage with the politicians. I mean, this is freedom of speech. That is a fundamental right in this country, and it's being eroded. And that is very, very dangerous. And I think Keir Starmer has a lot to answer for, because he, in my opinion, listening to him, I remember him saying it in the summer, calling people far right. He absolutely stoked those riots.
Just on that idea of stirring up racial hatred. I mean, we didn't have time to play the full 13-minute video there, as I'm sure people can appreciate. I imagine many people watching this have possibly already watched it out of curiosity. He was saying some things about how, he's disagreeing with mass immigration. He was disagreeing with the idea of there being, asylum seekers, specifically in his case, in the Welsh valleys. And, to me, that seemed relatively reasonable. I don't think it was stirring up racial hatred. Are you surprised that it got that far, or...?
I think the thing that stuck out for me is what the police are struggling with, this idea that they two-tier police. So what's happened is you've had this guy who's made these comments. Some people may have liked them, some people would have not have liked them. But the point is you've had people who've done equally extreme things, far more extreme things on the other side, who didn't even get a knock on their door, forget put in front of a judge and maybe potentially facing 7 years. And this is where the judiciary can help out the police by being proportional. It does look like if you're in line with the Prime Minister, because he said some very strong words about what he would like to see happen, you're fine, you can push. And if you're not, you're in trouble, as he sees, if he sees you as far right. And I think that's a worry for our country, because it's breaking communities apart. We have to let people have free speech, but more importantly, politicians need to step back from winding up the system to act against the public.
I will just draw a distinction, because I mentioned Peter Lynch, who sadly took his own life whilst behind bars. But Peter, as I understand it, was actually convicted for being part of disorder, physical disorder. In a way, of course, that Jamie was not. Jamie's was verbal. It was more of a freedom.
It was an opinion. He expressed
it was an opinion thing. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that I think either of them should have gone to prison, by the way, but there is a difference to that offence there. So I'll make that very clear. But I think, the question I've been posing now, pretty obviously, really, is whether or not Keir Starmer had a role to play in people like Jamie even ending up in court. Do you think he did with the rhetoric he was using at the time?
No, I don't think that he did. I don't think we have. Thank goodness, I don't think we have that kind of judiciary. I mean, let's remember that we have. I know you're not always plugged in reading the Guardian, but I was reading a piece earlier in the week from one of the Just Stop Oil people who is rightly behind bars because they were found guilty of those offences. I mean, it seems to me, as far as Jamie's concerned, that actually the system worked. That the jury found him innocent, and that was right. Of course, there were some cases.
He was locked up for 17 days, this man. Imagine the one.
Let Matthew come back.
Yeah, and there were, I mean, look, there were always questions about whether cases should get there. A lot of innocent people do end up locked up because that's how the system works before they're ultimately found innocent. What I don't think we can have is the narrative of, this is a whole group of political prisoners. This takes us over to what happened in the States, where Trump just let out everybody who had been found guilty in court after court for their part in the disorder there.
I think it does pose the question. I think you're right, fair enough, absolutely. But I do also think it poses the question, Sean, that if more people had pleaded not guilty and it had gone to a jury of quote-unquote normal people, really, I think there's a significant chance that more of them would have got off.
Absolutely.
I think there's two things to say. If the Prime Minister stands up and says he expects, it pushes the view of it one way. He's very important to the mood music. But I go back to me, which is the more important point. If we are seeing that only a certain political view ends up in court and somebody can do something equally extreme on the other end of that political view and doesn't even get a knock on the door, you pull communities apart, you create suspicion. And that, for me, is what this case highlights. We had a case, I think it was in London, where people had posted stuff, teachers had to go into hiding and all sorts. Nobody went and spoke to them about 17 days in jail while they figured out if they were guilty or not. And that did happen in this case. And that drives the idea that it's two-tier policing. People hate that term. The police are really struggling with it. But this is what people cite as evidence. And the powers that be, including Keir Starmer, need to do something about the perception they are putting out.
Yeah. And the other thing that Keir Starmer did wrong, in my opinion, was not to give people the accurate information. The killer, and I'm not going to name him and give him that satisfaction, he is now a terrorist. He is now in prison for terrorist offences. And the police knew that, the Prime Minister knew that, and that information should have been given at the beginning. It should not have been withheld. And that in itself did not help. Nothing Keir Starmer did in the summer helped bring us together. Everything was, and the second thing that was was amazing for me as a former barrister, the amount of people who did not get bail, this chap. That's normally he would have got
17 days behind bars.
Yeah, he would have got a bail within a few days.
So, final word to you on this, Matthew. Do you feel as though there's any truth to that? Because Keir Starmer presumably will. He does say, doesn't he, that he doesn't want to contempt the court. He doesn't want to contempt the trial.
Yeah. Look, I think that what there was initially, if you remember, there was a name who wasn't the person who was subsequently found guilty was being circulated in that was actually, in a sense, the thing that started the social media issue and then caused disquiet. And I think that Keir was trying to make sure that they, was trying to do with that person who was completely nothing to do with it, wasn't involved. Let's remember that people who went to prison, a lot of them were for serious offences. This wasn't just for hurty words. This was for standing outside that Holiday Inn in Rotherham, which was about to burn down.
Yes, but some of them were a 53-year-old grandmother.
But
you can still do things wrong if you're 53, Anna.
No,
the issue here, hold on.
Posting on Facebook.
The last thing to look at is who reported him, because it has a political element, because you had Labour councillors running around encouraging people to report. That's something that the Labour Party need to look at, because, again, I go to my point about pulling communities apart. It looks like people are trying to silence different political views. That's not helpful.
Well, look, thank you to our wonderful panel. Thank you again, by the way, to Adam King, the barrister in this case. He's been sitting diligently over there. And I think, I probably know who I would give a call to if I was ever in a pickle, but that's probably a matter of when, not if.